A K-pop idol is about to premiere a film at one of the most prestigious festivals in the world, and it's not a movie she's starring in. It's a movie about her. This September, the Toronto International Film Festival will host the world premiere of a documentary built entirely around one artist, Lisa, of Blackpink. Not a fan-made tribute, not a streaming afterthought, a gala program slot. The kind studios fight for, and the kind that's launched serious award season conversations for decades. For an industry that has spent years treating K-pop as a niche, a fandom, a marketing case study, this is different. And whether it works could tell us something bigger about who Hollywood actually lets in, and on what terms. If you don't follow K-pop closely, here's what you need to know. Lisa, full name Lalisa Manobal, is one of 4 members of Blackpink, arguably the most commercially dominant girl group on the planet right now. Stadium tours, billions of streams, a level of global reach. Most Western pop acts never touch. But Blackpink operates as a unit, and units have limits. For years, Lisa's identity outside the group was something fans pieced together from interviews and side projects. A rapper, a dancer, a fashion ambassador, but rarely the main character of her own story. That changed over roughly the past year. Lisa stepped back from Blackpink's group activities, the first real gap since she was a trainee as a child, to build something solo. Music. Acting. A brand carrying her own name, not the group's. Then, on July 20th, 2026, Sony Music Vision made the announcement that turned that quiet solo chapter into a headline. A feature documentary called Always Lalisa, directed by Soo Kim, is heading to Toronto. That's the story we're unpacking today. Not just what the film is, but why its existence and where it's premiering has industry people paying close attention. Part 1. The announcement. Let's start with exactly what was announced, because the details matter more than they might seem at first glance. Always Lalisa is a 97-minute documentary, produced by Sony Music Vision in association with RCA Records. It's directed by Soo Kim, a name serious documentary watchers will recognize. Kim directed The Last of the Sea Women, a 2024 documentary that built real critical momentum on the festival circuit. Bringing her onto a project about a pop star isn't a small choice. It signals this isn't being treated as a glorified tour diary. It's being positioned as a director-driven, artistically serious film, the kind that gets reviewed, not just recapped. The premise, according to the announcement, follows a pivotal year in Lisa's life. The year she stepped away from Blackpink's group activities for the first time since childhood, to build a solo career on her own terms. Music, acting, brand building, all while knowing an eventual return to the group is coming, and while trying to hold on to some kind of private life in the middle of it. That tension between individual ambition and group obligation, between public performance and private self, is a story arc, not just a highlight reel. Then there's language. The documentary features dialogue in English, Thai, and Korean, a detail that's easy to skip past but is actually significant. It signals a film that isn't localizing Lisa for a single market. It's presenting her the way she actually moves through the world, shifting between continents, languages, and industries within the same year. Now, the part generating the most conversation among industry watchers, where this is premiering. Always Lalisa isn't dropping quietly on a streaming platform behind a marketing push. It's premiering in the gala program at the 51st Toronto International Film Festival, running September 10th through July 20th, 2026. If you're not familiar with festival hierarchies, here's why that matters. TIFF's gala program isn't just any slot on the schedule. It's reserved for the festival's highest-profile premieres. The film's expected to generate press coverage and often awards season conversation. Getting a documentary about a pop star into that specific slot isn't a given. Festivals are curatorial gatekeepers. They don't need star power. They can get that anywhere. What TIFF is signaling, deliberately or not, is that this film is being read as a piece of cinema worth taking seriously. Not a promotional stunt that happens to have a famous name attached. That's the announcement. Stripped to its facts, a major studio, a respected documentary director, a substantive personal narrative, and a top-tier festival launch. On paper, that's the exact formula that's turned musician documentaries into award contenders before. The question the industry is now asking is whether a K-pop artist specifically can walk that same path, and that's where the story gets more complicated. Part 2. The bigger picture. To understand why this documentary is landing the way it is, you have to zoom out and look at the year Lisa's actually had. Because Always Lalisa isn't announcing a story out of nowhere. It's documenting one that's already been unfolding in plain sight, one milestone at a time. Start with music. In 2025, Lisa released her debut solo album, Alter Ego. her first full-length statement as an individual artist, separate from Blackpink's group discography. Then came Coachella, one of the most watched stages in global pop culture, where she performed as a solo act, not as a member of a group performing a shared set. As Lisa, under her own name, in front of one of the industry's most scrutinized audiences. From there, she moved into television. Lisa made her acting debut in Season 3 of HBO's The White Lotus, a show that's become something of a launchpad and a prestige signal in its own right. Crossing from music into scripted television is a notoriously difficult transition, and doing it on a show with that show's reputation is a statement in itself. Then, sports and global spectacle, Lisa performed Goals, alongside Anitta and Rema, at the opening ceremony of the FIFA World Cup 2026. Arguably one of the largest live audiences any performer can access, period. That's not a K-pop stage. That's not even strictly a music industry stage. That's a global cultural moment, and she was part of it. Around the same time, Lisa became the first K-pop artist named to the Met Gala's host committee, a role that sits above simply attending the event, positioned instead as part of shaping it. And she landed a Vanity Fair cover in the summer of 2026, the kind of media placement that's long functioned as an informal industry marker of who's considered a genuine cultural figure, not just a chart performer. Look at that list again. A solo album, Coachella, an HBO prestige drama, a World Cup stage, the Met Gala's Inner Circle, a Vanity Fair cover. Individually, any one of those is a good year for an artist. Together, in the span of roughly 12 months, they read less like a string of appearances and more like a coordinated crossover, an idol expanding into music, television, fashion, and global spectacle, almost as if working through every major cultural institution the Western entertainment world has to offer. That's the context always Lalisa is stepping into. It's not introducing Lisa to the world. The world, arguably, already met her this year, one headline at a time. What the documentary does is take all of that momentum and give it a single authored narrative, one director's attempt to explain what that year actually meant from the inside. Which raises the real question at the center of this story. A great year of headlines is one thing. A director-driven documentary at a top festival is something else entirely. So what, specifically, makes this crossover attempt different from the ones that came before it? And why is that difference the part that's actually rattling people in the industry? Part 3. Why it's shocking the industry. Let's talk about why industry insiders are treating this differently than past K-pop crossover moments, because the pattern here isn't new, but the shape of it is. For years, the relationship between K-pop and the Western entertainment industry has followed a familiar shape. An idol releases an English-language single aimed at crossover radio play. A group member takes a supporting or guest role in a Western production, treated more as a curiosity booking than a serious casting choice. Self-produced, fan-facing concert films and documentaries get released directly to streaming platforms, financed and controlled almost entirely by the artist's own label, built for an audience that's already converted. All of that has generated huge numbers: streams, views, ticket sales. What it hasn't reliably generated is critical or institutional legitimacy in the way Western film and music industries measure it. Fan enthusiasm and industry credibility have tended to run on separate tracks. Always, Lalisa breaks from that pattern in a few specific structural ways. And structure is the operative word here, because this isn't just about who's involved. It's about what kind of gatekeeping the film had to pass through to exist at all. First, the studio backing. This isn't a self-financed vanity project distributed through a fan platform. It's produced by Sony Music Vision, in association with RCA Records, a major label documentary operation with its own commercial and reputational stakes in how the film performs and how it's received critically, not just how it performs with an existing fan base. Second, the director. Soo Kim isn't a music video specialist brought in to shoot glossy behind-the-scenes footage. She's a documentary filmmaker with an existing body of respected, festival-recognized work. Attaching a director with that kind of independent credibility to a project about a pop star is, in itself, a statement of intent. It tells you the studio wants critics engaging with the craft of the film, not just fans engaging with the subject. Third, and this is the one industry watchers keep circling back to, the festival placement. A gala program premiere at TIFF is a curatorial decision made independently of Lisa's existing fanbase. Festival programmers aren't selecting films based on how many people already follow an artist online. They're selecting based on whether a film, as a piece of cinema, earns its place on that specific stage. For a documentary about a K-pop artist to clear that bar at one of the most influential festivals in the world is a different kind of validation than a high view count or a chart position. It's an industry saying, in effect, that this belongs in the same conversation as any other prestige documentary premiering that week. Put those three factors together: major studio backing, an independently credible director, and a top-tier festival slot, and you get something the older pattern rarely produced: a film built to be evaluated on cinematic terms, by people whose job is specifically not to be swayed by fandom. That's the structural difference. It's not that Lisa is more famous than K-pop artists who've attempted crossovers before her. Global fame was never really the missing ingredient. It's that, for arguably the first time at this scale, the machinery around the project, the studio, the director, the festival, is built the same way the machinery around any serious documentary contender would be built. Whether that machinery is enough to convert festival buzz into the kind of lasting industry legitimacy that changes how K-pop artists are cast, courted, and covered going forward, that's the part nobody can answer yet. Toronto will be the first real test. Part 4. Stakes. What's next? So, what's actually riding on this, beyond one premiere? If Always Lalisa lands well at TIFF, strong reviews, real critical engagement, the kind of press coverage that treats it as a film first and a celebrity story second, industry watchers suggest it could function as a proof of concept. Not just for Lisa, but for how Western studios and festivals think about K-pop artists as subjects worth serious cinematic treatment, rather than subjects worth a licensing deal. That's a meaningful distinction. One is a marketing relationship. The other is a creative one. And Lisa isn't slowing down to wait and see how the reception lands. The documentary arrives in the middle of an already packed run of projects extending well past the festival circuit. She has 2 Netflix projects in the pipeline: an action film called TYGO, and a separate, currently untitled romantic comedy, which, if either performs well, would push her further into scripted leading roles rather than guest or supporting parts. On top of that, she's set to headline a Las Vegas residency, Viva Lalisa, at the Caesars Palace Coliseum in November 2026, a venue with its own history of turning global-scale musical residencies into cultural events in their own right. Line those up, and the documentary starts to look less like a standalone event and more like a hinge point in a much longer play: music, then acting, then a residency built for spectacle at a venue with serious cultural weight, all punctuated by a director-driven film that puts an authored narrative around the whole stretch. If Toronto goes well, that narrative gets a credibility stamp right in the middle of it. There's also the awards season question, which is worth naming carefully because it's speculative by nature. A strong reception at a festival with TIFF's track record can sometimes start conversations that extend into documentary awards categories later in the year. Whether Always Lalisa becomes part of that conversation depends entirely on how it's actually received once real critics and industry voices see the finished film, not the announcement. Nobody, not the studio, not the festival, not us, gets to decide that in advance. Toronto decides it. What is fair to say is this: if a K-pop artist documentary can generate serious awards season buzz off the back of major studio backing and a top-tier festival slot, that changes the calculus for how Western studios approach K-pop talent going forward. It stops being a question of whether the audience is there, that was never really in doubt, and starts being a question of whether the industry is willing to build the same kind of prestige infrastructure around K-pop artists that it builds around anyone else it takes seriously. That's the bigger stake sitting underneath one film premiere. But it's worth pausing here, because none of this is guaranteed. And there are real open questions about whether buzz like this actually converts into something lasting. Part 5. Balance skepticism. So let's be the skeptical voice in the room for a second, because a fair piece of analysis has to be. A gala program premiere at TIFF is a genuine achievement, but it's a starting point, not a guarantee of anything beyond itself. Plenty of films get strong festival receptions and never find a wide theatrical release, or land quietly on a streaming platform with far less cultural conversation than the premiere generated. Festival buzz and box office performance are related, but they're not the same currency, and it's entirely possible for critics to praise a documentary while its commercial rollout still ends up modest. There's also the question of audience conversion. Lisa's existing fan base is enormous, global, and highly engaged. That much isn't in dispute. But a documentary needs to work for audiences who walk in knowing nothing about Blackpink, K-pop, or Lisa's solo career, if it's going to cross over the way its backers clearly hope it will. Whether Always Lalisa achieves that, whether it plays as a compelling character study to someone with zero prior context, is something only the finished film and the people who actually see it in Toronto can answer. An announcement, however well produced, can't answer that question by itself. And it's worth being honest about industry incentives here, too. Sony Music Vision and RCA Records have a direct commercial interest in this film, generating exactly the kind of institutional credibility narrative we've just spent several minutes unpacking. That doesn't mean the analysis is wrong. The studio backing, the director, and the festival slot are real, verifiable facts, not spin. But it's worth remembering that a well-executed announcement is designed, in part, to shape exactly this conversation before a single review has even been published. So the honest version of this story isn't K-pop has officially conquered Hollywood. It's narrower and more interesting than that. A specific film with specific industry backing is about to get a specific kind of test at a specific festival, one that's launched serious contenders before. Whether it passes that test is genuinely unknown right now. What's not in question is that the attempt itself, structured this deliberately, hasn't quite been made this way before. So here's where that leaves us. In September, in Toronto, a K-pop artist is going to walk into one of the most scrutinized rooms in the film industry, not to accept an award, not to perform a song, but to have a film about her own life judged purely as a film. That's a different kind of pressure than a stadium stage or a World Cup opening ceremony. Those rooms want a performance. This room wants a verdict. If always Lalisa earns strong reviews out of TIFF, it won't just be a good week for Lisa. It'll be a real data point in a much bigger, ongoing argument about whether Western film and music institutions are actually ready to treat K-pop artists as serious creative subjects, not just commercial ones. If it doesn't land the way its backers hope, that argument doesn't disappear either. It just gets more complicated. Either way, this is a story worth watching closely over the next couple of months. Not for the premiere itself, but for what the reaction to it ends up revealing about an entire industry's blind spots. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Is the entertainment industry actually ready to take K-pop artists seriously as cinematic subjects? Or is Toronto about to expose how far that acceptance still has to go? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want more breakdowns like this, ones that go past the headline and into what these moments actually mean for the industry, subscribe, because this story is far from over.